Welcome back, everybody, to Gray Maybe. It has been a minute, but we're back. I'm back. Roderick's back. Producer Roderick is back. And I have someone very special to start out the season with. This person is someone I've really enjoyed working with over the years, not just working with, but also, and having as a peer on jobs, but also really looking up to professionally and just having the time of my life with this person. And also socially, I've gotten to know them really well. We have a lot of things in common. We like to talk a lot. We're interested in a lot of deeper topics. And so without much further ado, I really want to introduce Scott Hislop to the podcast. Scott's actually a fan of the podcast. You have listened to the podcast, and you were like an early listener too, like right out the gate. And you were like posting about it. All the love to Scott because he loves the podcast. And that was like all that support meant the world to me and to the podcast. It's been really, really lovely. Scott is a dancer. He's a choreographer. He's a choreographer's assistant. He's probably a producer. He is a father, dad person. He's a fantastic dancer. I said dancer, but like a fantastic dancer and all around very cool human being. So Scott, welcome to the pod. Will you introduce yourself and anything you want to add?
Oh, God. Well, all those things. Thank you very much. That's very sweet and kind. Survivors of abuse don't really talk about themselves. So.
Yeah, it's not the favorite. It's like, here, look at me, look at me.
Right. We get small. We get very small with these things. But no, all of those things. I host some.
Yes, that's right. Oh my God. Wait. Yes, you host. And also, I wanted to make sure I brought this up because I was very affected by your one-man show. Can I call it a one-man show? Yeah, in the Fringe Festival a long time ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. I watched it live, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, he did this one-man show that was so incredibly courageous and thoughtful and provoking and gut-wrenching and mesmerizing. It was so good. I was so invested in every second, and I was so like I already was like Scott's, the GOAT. But then that's like next level because you acted in it, you wrote it, like everything about it was just so incredible. And when you see something like that and see someone do something like that, it opens your mind to like, oh wow, like what could I do, or what could other people do, or what can be done, right? Yeah. And that was one of those moments. So I have to mention that. What was the name of the one-man show?
It was called I Want to Bury My Testimony. It was about growing up gay and Mormon. It was a little bit of a pun because, when you once a month, Mormons get up every Sunday, and not one Sunday every month, Mormons get up to bear their testimony. And as a kid, I always thought the words were, I want to bury my testimony. So that's what I would always used to say. And so it ended up being kind of apropos for the title of the show because
I love that.
Because what we're talking about today, it's probably going to come up, my one-man show. There's a little bit of there's some connections there. So
good, because that show was amazing.
Thank you.
I hope you do it again some way. If you put it on film, if it's not already on film, if it's on film, let's link a way for people to see it. It was fantastic. It was so good. You made a joke about how we like to get small. Like I've noticed in myself as a performer, I only want to be watched when I'm ready to be watched.
Yes.
It's like, no, I'm on right now. You can watch me, and then when I'm off, like, don't fucking look at me.
Yeah.
So I'm very I feel like we're all that way. Like we're fine being like gazed at and examined, but only when we're offering and willing to do it in that moment. Otherwise, it's kind of like very intrusive. So thank you for being willing to be gazed at today.
What did you call me?
I know, right? So this season is about abuse, and I decided that topic after the election for very obvious reasons. If you know me personally, you know exactly where I stand. And it felt very appropriate and it felt very powerful for this season to be talking about that. And I wanted it to be very broad in the topic of abuse, mostly because I love variety in all of the topics I've done. I want a lot of variety because I want to have as many people feel seen as possible, right? I want as many people listening to feel like they earn their seat at the table of whatever we're discussing. I think for myself, my first reaction is to discredit why I don't belong at the table, why my situation is different, and why I don't deserve to have the things, the recovery, the whatever of the situation. And so I want to hit all of the avenues that I can so that people feel like, oh, no, I deserve a seat in this area or this spot over here. So we're starting off with your story and your experience, which you told me you were willing to give last February, and it stood out in my mind as like, absolutely, that has to happen. How can it happen? I had no intention of doing this season this soon, but then this happened, and you came to my mind immediately, and I was like, I hope he's still willing. And so without me blabbering much more, will you start to tell us a little bit about your story or your experience with this topic?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting perspective, mine, because the abuse happened a long time ago, when I was very young, but it didn't come out until more recent. And I think that's pretty common to be locked away.
Very.
I've in all my research and my recovery and my healing, I've found out how common it is. And I want to be clear by saying it surprised me more than anyone. It really did. I did not expect. I would have, if I had known this was there, I would have tackled it a long time ago. I'm the type of person that, wants to walk through the fire. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to heal from it. I'm going to learn from it. I'm all of that. And so for this to start to bubble up 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, it just rocked my world. Even though there were signs, there was writing on the wall my whole life. So many things clicked. So many things started to make sense. A big piece of the puzzle was like, oh, hello. Okay, I digress. So I'll talk about the abuse, and I'll talk about how it did start to rear its head, and I'll talk about my process of what's happened since. So I basically was 4 years old, and I was sexually assaulted multiple times by my uncle. It happened in the dead of night. I don't know how many times. I don't know how many nights. I know it was more than one night.
Right.
And I don't know who knew about it. That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
But I can't say it wasn't dealt with, or he was removed, but I wasn't dealt with.
Right.
This is and it's a very common Mormon story too, by the way. P.S. Put a pin in that. I had just turned 4 years old, so this happened between. It happened the week between Christmas and New Year's. And my birthday is December 20th. My birthday happens right before Christmas. I know that I don't. How graphic can I get?
You can get as graphic as you want to get. There's a trigger warning on this episode previous, so people know to be warned, and it's completely up to you as how much you want to say or not say.
Okay. Sorry. Let's go back. About 4 years ago, a little over than 4 years ago, and And I do want to say, I think there was a prep period for this to even start to bubble up. I had done significant work on myself about 4 years leading up to that. I don't think this would have come out had I not done that. So I was already sort of working with therapists, and not to uncover abuse. Again, this was all hidden to me. This was locked away. But working on other parts of I was working on myself pretty vigorously, with several different specialists, and because something was wrong. And so there was a good amount of, sort of priming that happened, and I was in a good space. This is 2020, so we're in 2020. It was the year of the pandemic. I was meditating my ass off. I was in such a good place, and I was centering myself, and I was, really doing a lot of internal work, if you will. And I got to this point where it just sort of hit something hard, and like my meditations wouldn't work anymore. I was really calming my mind before that, and all of a sudden it went clink. It hit something, and then nothing. Like, I was like, why aren't my meditation? Like, I couldn't, just my mind would just be crazy when I would try to do my meditations. And all the chatter just went crazy. And I was like, I was doing so well before. Why? I was meditating twice a day at this point, and it just hit something. It wasn't until about a year later when I realized I think I had gotten as far, as deep as I could go. And when like when in the movies or the cartoons, when they're like digging for the treasure or digging for the gold or digging for the grave, and all of a sudden they hit clink. Tink. And I think that's what happened. Yeah. I think I got to this locked away box, and I was like, what's happening? What is that? Why is everything was going back? I was taking backward steps. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after that, so this is very beginning. This is January of 2021. I'm a date person. I love dates. I'm very good at remembering things, by the way, by how I associate it with dates. I call them fragments. I just started getting these fragments. They were like needles in a haystack. And they were very specific. There was a kind of like what I call a moving picture. Like, it was male, someone with shoulder length hair looking over his left shoulder. And it kept on happening all the time. Just it'd be waking dreams almost. I'd just go through my day. I'm like, what is that? What is that? Mm-hmm. And the face was all blurry. Mm. I couldn't see the face, but that was one of them. And it wasn't of any, like sometimes you can see images or pictures because they're pictures that exist in your, right, your family's like old picture books. It wasn't anything like that, but it was just someone sitting down and looking over his left shoulder length hair. And I was like, why does this keep on coming to me? Then another thing that would happen was, not every time my husband and I were intimate, but sometimes when we were intimate, this very clear, disturbing, graphic picture would scare the hell out of me, because it wouldn't happen all the time we were intimate, but a lot of times. And you'd be like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what that is. And it just kept happening. It's very specific. The same sort of visual. And just those two things right there, they were just happening with more and more speed, or like the time in between was getting smaller and smaller. And then there were a couple things like health elements that I've always had in my adult life that kept on kind of pinging me. Like, what is that? What is that?
Like little flare-ups and stuff.
Just the remembering. I'm like, why do I have that, or what is that? And like, I'd been to specialists about it. And, one was specific about the throat. And so these things were just kind of haunting me. And I'm the type of person that listens to those messages. I think it's our body's way, our spirit. Something is like saying, hey, investigate. There's something going on. And I got sick of feeling crazy, honestly, because I started to go, does this mean something? What is that? And then I was like, no, you're crazy. You're so dramatic, Scott, because, I can be one that can be a little dramatic. And so.
No way. You and I are both like that. And we're also both like, we'll talk ourselves down logically to a place of we don't qualify. Well, it's not a big deal. Like literally. Yeah. Go on.
And that got kind of tiresome, because I was like, why is this happening to me? And if something's happening, I want to know. I don't want to ignore it. And so finally I started to seek professional help, very specific professional help. And it wasn't hard, because I think I'm so open to these things anyway, to investigate and to find out. And curiosity has always been one of my traits. And it came out pretty quickly. And once you start to open those floodgates, stuff, if you go searching for stuff, it tends to reveal itself. And it did. And the face of that male that would look, it started to fill in. And I went under, I investigated that way with the help of a specialist. And then stuff really started coming out. It turns out that locked away box was something that, protected me until it doesn't, right? Until you start to go, oh, this is actually an impediment in my life. This is actually all of the things that, from all of those things, those traits, those attributes about yourself, that it turns out they're all connected.
Right.
And so when I went under to sort of help me bring this stuff up, I saw very clearly. I remembered very clearly certain things. I remembered the grooming process. I remember the touch of the leather couch on me. I remember the feelings I had. I remember actual moments. I remember all of the playfulness. I remember the colors of the chair across the room. And I didn't at that time remember the happening, except I would just get flashes in the dead of night. I knew I was in my bed. And then the next very clear, I have such clarity about it, memory, is the feeling of my throat hurting. And so I know I was violated. I know I was orally raped. I also had so many problems here my whole life. My tonsils got taken out couple of months after that. Didn't know it was connected to that, but there was a big flare up. And I had all of these problems ever since my tonsils were taken out, sinus issues and stuff. But I remember being in pain, and I remember crying out, and I remember my mom coming in and sending my uncle away. That's very clear. In the next several months, within a year after that, other things would sort of like trickle out. Just in the middle of the day, sometimes during a meditation. One time I was laying in my bed, and there was a very clear memory of, a game that he was playing with me when I was in my bed. But I had a very clear smell memory of his privates. And so little things would trickle out. It wasn't actually, and I'll skip forward a little bit, it wasn't actually and then it stopped. And there's the memories of actually, and it was all process and work and therapy and whatever. But interestingly enough, and I thought I I thought it was sealed shut. I never thought I would remember any of the during. I thought that not that, I guess I assumed because it had been so many years that any sort of memory was sort of leaked out.
Right. Or like through self-preservation, like people who have been in car accidents don't remember the actual accident, because it's so traumatic, and it never comes back. They're just like, oh yeah, I just woke up in the hospital or something.
And interestingly, last month, I had a big upload, if you will. I was out of the country, and it's so funny. And I think, and maybe it's because, maybe you're allowed to, maybe the body preserves it until maybe you're ready or able to process it. I don't know, but I was out of the country, and I read one sentence. I was reading on my laptop, and I read 4 years old, and it just went click, and all of these memories of actual during the which I'd never had. I had the before, and I had the directly after, but I'd never had during, and they came out a lot. And I was fascinated by it. I was just like, huh. And I was just sitting there in my hotel room, and I was just like sort of registering click, click, click. And all of these moments, these sort of vignettes, these moments were just sort of available to me, and I was remembering in real time. And I'm fascinated by this stuff. So because some people are like, oh, I wouldn't want to know, but I've always, the more I know, it just helps me.
When you had already kind of started down this journey and had some support in unpacking.
Yes.
So I feel like you also had like a baseline of understanding and acceptance to kind of really go full ham. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just so crazy. Just that one word, 4 years old. I read those 3 words, and it just it opened up, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, kind of, time is fuzzy, even though this was a month ago. I don't remember how long I was sitting there, but I was just like kind of processing all these memories, just sort of like adjacent to it, not in my feelings or anything like that. And then they drifted, and I was like, no, I want more. And I was like, wait, just go into your body. And I went like this, and then I had the worst panic attack of my life.
Oh my gosh.
The room started coming in.
Right.
I started hyperventilating.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't see. Thank God my dear friend was out of, there with me in a room, two rooms down the hall. And I called her, and I was like, can I come over? And she's like, yeah, of course. And I came over, and I collapsed, and it took a long time for me. She's like, you have to breathe, because I couldn't breathe. And she knew. She's my good friend. So she knows about, the abuse story, and it kind of bowled me over. I was so fascinated by it. And then as soon as I was like, well, wait, go into the feeling, because I was just trying to get more, and I just turned into a scared, traumatized 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And the next day I was so tired, and I was like,
yeah, you were
she's like,
emotionally
Scott. She's
hungover.
Like, she's like, Scott, your body was holding on to that for how long? And then you released it. And I was like exhausted.
Yeah.
So anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's the abuse. Or that's as far as much as I remember, and how it came out, sort of the sort of 2 time spans that it came out. Now, very quickly after this did come out, and so I'm in 2021 now, I'm putting these pieces together. It dawned on me very quickly that I went, okay, how has this affected my life? And I was like, I need to know how this has affected my life, and I need to know where it's affected my life, and I need to know all this sort of stuff, and I need help for that. So I went into therapy, which I've been in ever since, and that has been a journey. And it turns out, Jillian, it affected my life in every way imaginable.
You don't say. Well, you say how it affected my life, but it's how did it change who I was, right?
Right.
Who would I have been had I not had this?
Oh, they're like
Which,
years.
like, I don't mean to like really throw people, because it doesn't have to be, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can look at it and be like, part of, I feel like, surviving stuff like this is grieving who I could have been without this bullshit, right?
Holy shit. I mean, I went, there are so many stages that I went through. I mean, you really kind of go through the what is it, the seven
Yeah.
stages of grief. You really do.
The interesting thing about the 7 stages of grief, last season we talked about grief, and Jada's like, oh, that's bullshit. It's not actually a thing. Like, you feel all of them, but it's like not, you don't like,
it's not a per linear.
Yeah. She's like, it's everybody thinks, but yes, you're going to go through a roller coaster.
I went through a roller coaster, and that grieving who you thought you, I mean, it's a big grief. I mean, fall of 2023, I kind of went through this whole, like, my life has been wasted. And I mean, talk about the sadness that sort of comes with that, because you start to think, well, who was I supposed to be? Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. I mean, just my experience, and I don't have the most perspective of sort of the process, because I mean, really, I'm still kind of in it. Mm-hmm. And I think I've moved through the darkest of it. I'm pretty sure I have, but who's to say what's next? So I think it whittles down to this: when you're 4 years old, mm-hmm. and something of that magnitude that's just classified as, because what does a 4-year-old know? It's bad. It's bad that happened. What happened to me was bad. Even if it was playful, and even if there was pleasure in it, which I don't know that there wasn't. I don't know.
Right.
And there's those, you start to sort of ask these really tough questions. And how did that inform, who I am? But when you're 4 years old and something like that happens to you, and no one is there to pick up the pieces, how does a 4-year-old process that?
Mm-hmm. They don't.
They
bury it like treasure, like a cartoon.
So basically, your whole operating system, if you will, like we're tech computer talk, mm-hmm. your whole operating system is born from that mm-hmm. darkness and that mm-hmm. trauma. And it basically, it took me years to whittle it down to, but it whittled down to, I am bad.
Yeah.
I'm bad, because adults don't do bad things mm-hmm. when you're 4.
Right.
You are bad. I'm bad. And so everything that you are looking for, wishing for, hoping for, aspiring to, they all become sort of reflections of, mm-hmm. well, first failure. Oh, failure. It just goes back into, I'm bad. I'm bad. Right. I'm bad. Successes don't mean anything.
Right. Because you believe you're ultimately bad.
I'm bad. I'm not worthy. It's worth. It's self-worth.
Right.
Is sort of built on this cornerstone of being small and being bad. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's funny. We talked to Julie Schmidt, who was a podcast guest of yours. Mm-hmm. She always has caught me, for years, and she'd be like, we'd be talking career, and I'd be like, I would just sort of shit on my career. Mm-hmm. And she'd be like, Scott, I would kill to have your career.
Yeah.
And
mm-hmm.
it was never good, because everything that you're trying to do just isn't good enough. You're trying to fill this hole that you don't even, first of all, I didn't even know was there.
Right.
Which is the whole sort of, just screwed up thing about this. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know it was there. And you're trying to fill this hole with things, that will never amount to making it right. Because at the end of the day, what I needed to be was parented.
Right.
And I had to parent myself these past 4 years, which was arguably the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Yeah, it's harder than parenting, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out parenting yourself is harder than parenting someone else. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because in a lot of recovery, regardless of what you're recovering from, a lot of people talk about having to reparent themselves as an adult, and that it's a lot of work, and it can be very rewarding, but that's a thing, guys. Like, you can reparent yourself. I suggest you do it with some kind of a 12-step or a therapist, the help of that. But like, a lot of times when we didn't get what we needed in childhood, whether it was attention, something as basic as attention or the right kind of love or whatever, but also if no one stood up for us when we needed it, if we were unseen, if we had, various types of abuses or grew up in chaotic households, like, these are all opportunities to reparent ourselves so that we can continue to like move on, move past, move through all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my operating system was shame.
Yeah.
Shame with a capital S.
Mm-hmm.
And about 4 years ago, a little less, when I, started really seeking the help of a therapist about this. I've been to therapy before, but about this specifically, his maybe our second, third, fourth session, he said, Scott, I want you to know what life is without shame. And
tell me, I need to know.
I'm still figuring that out. And it's basically been,
what did he tell you? Tell me.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I think I'm just starting to figure this out. I went through something pretty heavy this summer, and I liken it to, I go back to that first image of sort of getting to the metal clink. Mm-hmm. I think the past 3.5 years I've been working hard to dig this thing out. Mm-hmm. And I came to this place this summer where I felt I got it out. I got shame out. It's been, my sole mission for this last, 3-4 years, but I felt like I got it out. I pushed it out, and then I'm standing in this hole that I've created and I can't get out, because I used to be standing on that thing. Mm-hmm. Because it's an identity. Yeah. You are identified by your abuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I had this sort of reckoning where I'm like, I'm in a hole. I don't know how to get out. I'm tired. I've been working to sort of suss out and to pick apart all of this abuse and to get this shame out. And now I'm too tired to get myself out of this hole. And I mean, I wanted to, my poor husband, to put him through it this summer, but I was like, I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah.
And it feels weird. It feels like wobbly, because all of my, how I respond to the world at large, to people, has always been through the lens of shame.
Right.
And now I'm having to relearn how to advocate for myself, how to just even be, it's people pleasing, all of that, the little and small things are all connected to it, because that's what you do. You diminish yourself and to, in service of, abuse or whoever, and I'm not saying everyone's abusing me, but I'm saying that, I will go low. I will be down here. I'll be subservient, because that's my worth.
Yeah.
And it's really, that's hardwiring.
Yeah.
And that's behavior. And how do you, so now I've been on this quest, since I feel like I've filtered the shame out, but how do you change behavior when even if it's not connected to anything anymore? How do you go about changing behavior? And that's really tough.
Well, you definitely don't get to be unconscious anymore. Everything has to be super conscious, right? Because you don't have that luxury anymore of being unconscious. Everything has to be mindful. But I think you're touching on something really, really pivotal, because I think many people have experienced abuse, whether they're willing to accept it, deal with it, whatever, acknowledge it. And then there's a lot of people who maybe haven't or really are never going to acknowledge it so they can stay in the place of they haven't. And I think people misunderstand people identifying as survivors or victims of these types of things as like, who are you without this? Like you're one with it, like you know, you're using it as an identity. And the fact is it's not necessarily the identity, it's that I was robbed of my identity when this shit went down. And I don't know who I actually am anymore. So I have to figure it out because this situation happened. And like, that's what I hear when you're talking now. How would Scott, you know, respond to this is now, how would Scott without the situation respond to it? And I don't know what that is yet. And so I can't just do my defaults, which by the time you get to our age, you would think that we have it fucking figured out, right? Like, no, now it's brand new. Everything's brand new, right? That's really, really hard. And it's really tedious.
Yeah.
And it's really exhausting.
Yeah.
I think it's probably very rewarding if you can get to that part, but it's going to fucking take a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. From 4 years old till 44, that's a 41-year gap.
Yeah.
Of not even knowing. So you're operating.
That's a lot of habit.
Your navigation center that's running the show is completely shielded and completely in the dark. Yeah. And you have no idea, you know? And I will say, so let's talk about those 41 years in between. There were always problems. And that sucks to say. I have a hard time talking about that. There were always I always had health issues.
Right.
Stomach issues. I had sinus issues. I had, you know, I really believe that the body is always trying to tell you something. And it's funny because I don't have that anymore.
Wow.
You tell me.
Right. There's some very interesting research on what you're talking about. If you have experienced trauma, I highly recommend the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I think that's the title. I will link it. Okay. And then also anything by Gabor Mate. He's a very, very accredited doctor who also deals in trauma and whatnot. And he's very big on autoimmune's connection to trauma and stuff like that. What you're talking about is real. And there's a lot of evidence behind that in
absolutely.
Yeah, medicinal field.
I've been to polarity experts. You know, polarity is the study of energy in your body, you know, and this is what the Chinese understood so well 3,000 years ago, is that, you know, blocked stored energy creates problems and ailments and stuff. Yeah. But you know, there was other problems, just like it's your own. When you are constantly projecting abuser or abused, abuser, you have overreactions of things. My poor husband, I mean, thank God I married a saint. I mean, he's been the most patient person, but you know, when I say there's always drama, because, you know, you don't know why you're drama. You don't know why, because you're, first of all, stunted as a 4-year-old. Let's talk about that.
You're in survival.
Yeah, you're in survival always. And so triggers are really, they're true. You know, even though you don't know why you're being triggered, you're not conscious in that in that area. You're not conscious. I was so unconscious for so long. I mean, first of all, I numbed myself for how long? I mean, I with mostly marijuana was always, but I was always stoned. These are reasons why it took 41 years.
Wait, do you remember?
Because self-preservation. What? Yes. What? We're
gonna go
probably,
off. We're just gonna go take a sharp right, because I just remembered something. We might edit this out, or we might just keep it. Do you remember that job we did for New Year's in San Diego?
Yeah.
And we partied after the job. We all got hotel room. The job gave us hotel rooms at like a shitty Holiday Inn or something.
Yes.
And we were drinking. and this was probably peak in my eating disorder. So I was not eating, so drinking, right? So you get super hammered. And then I decided to take a hit of whatever weed you guys had,
Probably,
which
really,
I
yeah.
know better. Back when I was that was the most of my partying. I never did any hard drugs. That's not a brag. I'm just like that much of a control freak. I'm that scared of like real shit. But like, I took a hit of that weed, and that shit put me out.
Oh, yeah.
And then you felt so bad. You were like, you guys were such assholes. Why did we do that to her? Like, I don't even know why you thought it was your responsibility. I just remember you being so sweet about it, because I actually don't remember you as a stoner at all. But right when you said that, that memory came back, and I'm like, that's hilarious. I remember that job. I don't even know, where were we, at a casino? Did we perform at a casino, like a dry casino?
It was one of those.
Was it a Michael Chambers job?
Yes, Michael Chambers, reservation casinos.
And it was a dry casino, and they wouldn't let us stay there.
Oh, I definitely remember that.
Okay.
Yeah, most people actually that don't know that I was, I smoked so much pot.
Because you're so functional. You don't give pothead energy.
I know. I really
no
never
offense,
did.
but potheads aren't known for being like on time, with it, fast talking,
Totally.
very, like.
Which is probably why I sustained it for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This closet functional stoner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you talk about
kept me numb.
Yes, right? It did its job. And when you talk about like the grief that comes up about the health stuff, like I hear so much sadness and lost time and frustration, right? And I think one thing I've always noticed about myself and other people when they start going through rings of fire of recovery is the unthawing of grief that comes up, right? Like it's like all of this grief just unthaws, and like for a while it feels really bad and terrible, like you're never going to get out of it, like you're never going to mourn it enough, like you'll never be happy again, like you'll never be able to get out of it. And if you keep with it, you do come out of it. At least that's what I've seen in people and in myself so far. But I think there's like so much grief that has to be felt through these stages because of those things. Like you're grieving so many things. You're grieving who you were as a person. You're grieving like all the time and frustration and money you spent trying to get these mysterious ailments to be fixed when it was this one thing that was unjust to you, that was done unjustly, right?
Yeah.
I think that's such a huge part of recovery, is that kind of grief and uncovering all the little grieves and all the little sadnesses,
Yeah. There's a really weird, the way that it connects. Well, first of all, on that note right there, I especially after this last summer where I felt like I got to this new place, even though it was exhausting. I just have this, I just want to live life this second half, if I'm so lucky to live, for another half. I want to live with such clarity and with such purpose, and with it's this whole other what I never had before. I was always sort of like in survival mode, just sort of getting through. And I just want to live, without being cheesy, my best life without all of that baggage, dragging that around. I just, it's kind of exciting. And that's because I'm only this is after I felt the grief of like, oh, that whole first half of my life, is gone. And it's like, but now I'm like, okay, let's reframe it. Now I get to step into this second half, with completely, unbothered by all of that stuff, and shame is out the door, and, I'm still learning how to be without shame with a capital S, but it's getting better and better each day.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nope.
I was, and then, in terms of like how this affects your career, there was a real sobering moment that I had, I don't know, about a year and a half ago or something, where I realized that sort of that moment of oh, I'm just trying to fill, if I had all the, if when I get this, or if I can only get this money, if I get it was, I lived in the future so much I could never be present because that's too hard. That's so there was this real moment that I had of, oh my God, I am one of those people that I could diagnose, and other people that do what we do are in the business, in the industry. They're all just here trying to fill with accolades or resume or, and I'm like, I am that projection. I am that I am one of these people that has a graveyard inside that is trying to fill it with, and that was a real big moment for me, because I think this industry is chock full of people,
of hurt children,
of wounded people, of wounded people. And
well, who else wants to put themselves in front of everybody and be like, do you like me? Do you like me?
Totally.
Clap for me, please. And if you don't, I'll be crushed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for me specifically, that looked like hire me, like me. And I'd get in front and I would sabotage myself. I'm the worst at auditions, or I always was I was self-sabotaging. It was sort of like, no, I'm not worth it. At time and time again. I don't know how I did work so much. It was never through auditions.
Because you're fantastic. Number one. Let me just tell.
But it's interesting. It's interesting because it was never through auditions. It was always because I would finally get a job with someone and they would rehire me.
But I mean, that's kind of how it goes as you get older. You audition less and less, and it's more of through referral and recommendation and relationships. So that was like a natural progression. But for people who don't know Scott, he's an incredible dancer and performer. Incredible. He's also very beautiful. And so there's a lot of reasons why you got hired. And I want to say two things. I love that you're talking about shame, because I relate to that very deeply, because although I don't have the same experience of you, my default emotion is shame for everything. I mean, everything. Literally, if I am late, shame. If I almost get in a car accident, shame. If I miss an appointment, shame. I mean, everything, from the biggest things to the smallest things, my default emotion is always shame. Yeah. And that has been so hard to try to change, and it's gotten so much better, but it is still there. It is literally my first emotion, my first response to everything is shame, and it's something that I don't care for, and I'm trying to fix. I love that you talked about that. You also said a little bit ago that, you want the next portion of your life to be inspiring and go deep and all these things. And I just want to say, as someone who is objective to your process and someone who's experienced you many times over time and space, and not only has experienced you in the professional realm, but also on many opportunities socially and intimately, I have always seen you as that. So the interesting thing is, as much as I'm sure as these things happen to us, we're like, who would I have been? You, to me, have always been that. So whatever you want to be outwardly, that's you. That's your observation. But my experience of you, you have always been more deep and willing to have a conversation about something deep. You have always also been really funny when the time called, very appropriately funny and light, and always really good at what you do, But that's part of overachieving, right? Is to cover up all the things, right? But that's who I've always seen you as. Like the show you did, that's nothing but courageous and inspiring. Like nobody puts that much time and effort and putting themselves out there in that way that doesn't have that deep seated, inspirational, courageous spirit, So, I mean, I think the next part of your life, if I could be so audacious, is to say that you will see that for yourself. But we've all seen it around you, and I'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who I don't think sees that.
I think that's actually the nugget right there, right? Is it's so cliched, but you kind of have to see it yourself, feel it yourself, believe it yourself. I want that for me too.
Yeah,
I do.
I want to see what comes of it, because the last thing I saw on that broad scale, and every time I talk to you, is great.
I will tell you this. There's a story in this that for whatever reason about me, I don't know. I don't mind talking about these things, about what happened to me. I don't. Is it scary knowing this is going out? A little bit, but I don't mind. I don't mind it. Just like I did that show about sort of escaping and coming out and deprogramming from Mormonism. I feel compelled to be a voice because you might not have the same circumstances or same specificity as me, but people can relate to these things. I think it's very common. I think my story with what happened at the hands of my uncle is, especially, this was a 1979 turning into 80. Especially then with little boys.
No one's talking about stuff like that.
No one's talked about, but it happened. It happened. And here we come back to the link of sort of Mormonism. I think, this is my opinion. This is my experience. And so I hope I don't, turn off any listeners here, but I think this sort of, insidious behavior is very common in Mormonism. You're talking about a religion that was built with sexual assault towards young girls, sexual predatory, and covered up and never talked about.
Right.
I think as religion that it festered. This was, I don't think my uncle invented this. I think it happened to him and to him, whoever abused him before that. I know these things now. This is a pattern. It's built into, my DNA, all of us that would come from, the motherland of Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And it's gross and it needs to be talked about. And I can be a voice for that. And there will be another show. I guarantee you.
I'm very much looking forward to it. I think
with comedy.
Yeah, here we go. Let's laugh at tragedy. That's true comedy. It's, I think, any situation where there is a power imbalance and, religion is a really good opportunity for there to be power imbalances and some kind of a fear tactic, right? Afterlife, whatever it is, prophecies, chosen people, all of the things, right? And I think that's why we see it in everywhere, right? We see it a lot in religion, right? Catholic, I was raised Catholic. Luckily, I was not in any of those situations that happened with the church, but I was aware of it and concerned about it as a kid. It was kind of well known. It wasn't until later it came out, but it was kind of always well known, unfortunately. And we see it in our industry, right, where there's a lot of power and money and people do what they want to do because they have absolute power. So I'm hoping that era is coming to an end across the board, that the people who would be empowered to do those things are not able to reach and attain that kind of power or have access to do the things they're doing. And I know for sure that one of the ways we can change that is to speak it and to keep speaking it and to be really loud about it so that other people can be really loud about it and other people can speak about it, and to basically create an epidemic of truth, right?
Yeah.
And shine lights on it so that people don't feel ashamed. There are people who need to feel ashamed. They are not the ones being abused, right?
Yeah,
there are people who need to be afraid. They are not the ones being abused.
Yeah.
And that dynamic should shift. And people who are doing the abusing should feel that heat. Like they should be afraid. that, their secrets are going to come to light, that we're not going to keep those types of secrets anymore.
What is the antidote to shame? Bring it out into the light.
Yes.
Sunlight.
Yes.
And I have, as soon as I started processing and piecing this all together, I started telling, my husband first, obviously, but having conversations with all, the people that are nearest and dearest to me. I just feel this need to listen, that saying, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Yes.
Man, talking about, even if it was really hard for the first couple of times of saying out loud, which it was, like, to find the voice, it was like, I think,
especially your voice was so affected, right? To be able to speak after you've had so much throat stuff, right? Neck stuff, the bridge between the heart and the mind, the creativity center.
Yes. I think even as hard as it was, it's a lot easier than I think about the 40 years before that, right? All the havoc that was happening, that unbeknownst to me, but, again, just sort of writing on the wall the whole time. There were so many things that just clicked. So that was hard when I think back, so this is sort of the, not easy part. That's not the right word, but it's healing. It's part of the process for me. I don't ever want to keep it inside ever again.
Right. Do you feel like you have freedom? Like more freedom? Yes. Like your filters off. You don't have to like think about everything before you do it. And I mean, there's introspection in different ways because you're trying to work on people pleasing and all the things. But the freedom, that's what I found anyways, is that I was, for a really long time, I would have been mortified for anyone, especially in my professional life, to know that I struggled with an eating disorder, to know that I, had abortions, to know that like any of those things, like those were secrets I kept so close to my heart. Like I would have taken them to the grave if it just didn't become too much after a while and I had to like kind of unpack everything, right? My life wasn't working anymore and I was numbing out in all these different ways, right? So it was like, well, eating disorder is a way to numb out, period. But, I thought that if I told people these things, if they knew these things about me, they would think badly of me. They would think I was weak or weird or bad or whatever. I don't know. I would be so embarrassed about all of it. And I'm not sure why, but the shame, right? The shame. And when I started talking about it, not only did people not do the things I thought, which was like they were going to say, well, how do you know? Like they wouldn't believe me for some reason. First, like that was the first thing I thought, is that nobody would believe it because I was so functional or because I wasn't super, super skinny and hospitalized or because like all these things that they just wouldn't believe it. And then when I started talking, people not only believed me, but they were like, oh my God, me too. Or, oh my God, I relate. And then to feel like I started feeling like my vulnerability was such a detriment to me. But once I started talking, I felt bulletproof. I felt like nothing could get me. It was it was what I always wanted, right? By keeping the secrets, I was like, if I keep these secrets, I will be bulletproof. But I was like, I was literally translucent. Like everything could get to me. And then I started like, being really honest about all the stuff and just like telling it and saying it and doing it and whatever. And at any point, if it came up, it came out and whatever. And I literally started feeling untouchable. It was the complete opposite of what I had thought.
Yeah.
And I hope that is and becomes your experience as well.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because these secrets, once out, I think they're the things that kind of connect us in a much deeper way to people. So the opposite of like the curated Instagram, TikTok. We think we're connecting that way. We are getting so much distance between all of us, and it's the humanity. Yeah, it's the humanity. I think that sort of, it's also the gift of the awfulness
Yeah.
of what happened, of the
Yeah.
trauma. And you know, there's that part of it too. If you can see your way through and process through all of the shit and the shame and the grief and the this and the this, and you can get, I really believe that you can get to this place of gratitude. And that is the best medicine against it. And it's hard. And I'm not saying that I've gotten that to all areas of the abuse, but I've gotten to a lot. I've actually seen, okay, because this happened, blah, 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 or whatever. And I have nothing but gratitude for that. Or even just the general, I'm like, well, here I am and I'm okay. And I actually love my life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's gratitude in that. Yeah. So it helps me not to wallow, because there's that stuff comes up sometimes where I want to wallow and I want to be sad about.
Yeah, the little griefs that come up. Yeah.
Yeah, but
that's normal.
You know, I also recognize that every step of the way I had, you want to call them better angels, you want to call them spirit guides, you want to call them, you know, angels among us. I've been surrounded by goodness. Mm-hmm. You know, I was lucky. I was really lucky, because that 4-year-old boy, it didn't have to turn out the way that it did. It could have gone a much different way, you know, because that stuff can kill people. Mm-hmm. You know, be it through, you know, heavy drugs or prisons or continuing the abuse, whatever.
Yep. How do you numb the pain? Yep.
It just that it could have killed me. And
it's also dream killers. It's a dream killer. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Any kind of abuse is which is kind of, I don't want to be so bold to say that might be the worst, is the abuse that takes place that kills dreams, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I always had good people around me. Yeah. And maybe that speaks to who I am at the core. Maybe that speaks to, maybe people wanted to take care of me because I was a wounded child. There was always a wounded child that was present within me. I don't know, but it kept me on the path that got me here, which is, I'm doing okay. Doing actually.
Yes, you're very likable too. As much as you felt bad, you're very good. People very much like you.
I mean, I don't know about that.
That's true.
Know, but
that is true. I've never heard anybody say one bad thing about you, and I hear all the gossip.
No, there's definitely people.
No, I haven't. Nope, not one thing ever. Anybody, I bring your name up. I love Scott Hislop. Everybody loves Scott Hislop. Everybody does. Yeah, so you're very well loved amongst everybody I've talked to. So I have. There's a tradition on the podcast, as you know, because we're going to wrap you up. I'm trying to keep the pod in a tight hour and then it's long and arduous. So I say we don't give advice on the podcast, but do you have any suggestion for anyone who might be suffering right now?
I think just listen to that inner voice. If you were like me 4 years ago, where you're like, wait a minute, what is this? And you know, just listen to your inner voice, your inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it, your conscience. Mm-hmm. Listen to it, and as scary it is, walk towards it. Because if you get to the other side, you reap all the benefits. I'm so glad I walked towards it. I've done nothing. My life has been nothing but sort of reveal itself of all the goodness that I couldn't see, that I wouldn't see, that I, failed to see, or failed to manifest. All of that is because I walked towards darkness, the pain, the fear. So that's what I would say. And get yeah, it's like you said, get yourself in a program, get yourself therapy, surround yourself with the people that love you. And because I had that support system.
Yeah, support is everything. I always put links about sliding scale therapy in California and Psychology Today links to find accessible therapy. So always check the links at the bottom of the podcast, because I try to give as many links and help and things that are in relation to the subject matter.
Good.
Scott, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. My God, thank you. Thank you for telling me in last February, that you were ready to talk, because I was like, I have got to take him up on that because he is amazing. I'm so, so grateful for you as a friend, as a peer, as a coworker, as a podcast. Like, you're just fantastic. And I'm really, really grateful for you telling your story and imparting your wisdom and your process and your recovery here on Gray Maybe.
Thank you. I hope I wasn't all over the place.
And listen,
I'm not
this
concise.
But that actually is what makes it amazing. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, the more concise someone is, it's great. But when someone is speaking truly from their own experience, and they are everywhere, that's how people relate. They're like, oh yeah, I feel like that. Yeah. Like, it's very endearing, and you told your story perfectly. And I think a lot of people are going to very much relate.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.